House Chair, honorable members, honorable Minister, honorable Deputy Minister, honorable members, thank you. I stand on behalf of Mkhonto Wesizwe to debate the budget vote of the Department of Transport. Budget votes are about statements of various departments. Let me state from the outset that as the MKP, we reject vote 40 and we cannot associate ourselves with the policy direction of this department. We also reject the 40% increase in the fuel levy, which will bring more suffering to citizens, impose huge transport costs, and cause serious damage more than even the proposed VAT would have done. I'll detail some of this below. Clearly, Honorable Minister, the transfer of key strategic sectors in the hands of the largely untransformed white private sectors and foreign investors seems to be at the heart of your budget vote today. We are not surprised by all of this. In your first public statement as the new Minister of Transport, you did mention that you will engage with and take forward the work of the National Logistics Crisis Committee, which had been appointed by the President. The NLCC had not only set the agenda for the Minister of Transport, but this national roadmap has determined the work of a department. The main driver, of course, is structural reforms being implemented in various sectors of the economy, which forms part of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. This commenced, of course, the minister has been at pains to clarify that this is not privatization. The state, she claims, will retain ownership of its transport infrastructure or assets. As the MKP, Honorable Minister, we do not have an in-principle opposition to private sector participation or competition in the transport sector. But the minister clearly does not appreciate how her current policy reforms and the specific private sector model she's pursuing, if allowed to prevail, will undermine the very capacity of the state and sustainability of the transport sector and its ability in the long term to meet the development needs of the country. We say, Honorable Minister, there are better policy alternatives and there are more efficient PSP models which could allow the private sector to thrive whilst addressing the development needs of the country. And I'll spend part of my speech to explain what I mean by that. But let me start by explaining what structural reforms really means, because these have nothing to do with the removal of impediments to growth or constraints bandied about by the government. Structural reforms are nothing else but the opening of key network industries like transport, energy, telecoms, and others, which were historically dominated by SOEs, and transferred the control of these to the private sector in the country and to foreign investors. Structural reforms have nothing to do with building the capacity of the state or transforming the South African economy. It has got nothing to do with industrialization through promoting local manufacturing and local content, or building a class of black industrialists, or stimulating new economic activity as it is. In the specific case of transport, it has nothing to do with changing the structure of transport that we inherited in 1994. The fallacy of these structural reforms is in the belief that by simply bringing the private sector, things will change by themselves. The private sector is viewed as inherently inefficient. No detailed operational improvement plans are needed for these network industries. The Minister of Finance keeps on telling us that structural reforms are about removing the constraints on the economy, but fail to provide the numbers in the budget showing the benefits of structural reforms across the economy or to measure the efficiency gains. All these are not costed anyway. You know, the introduction of competition has in many instances been accompanied by the requirements to separate infrastructure from operations and creation of regulatory authorities. But the design of suitable industry structure is key to the introduction of any competition minister. Competition authorities and regulations have therefore a legal and a moral duty to ensure that specific sector industry structure they approve are in the long-term interest of the specific sector and the economy at large. If they approve multiple operators in a specific sector, competition authorities should satisfy themselves that there will be adequate revenues generated to fund operations and maintenance, as well as capacity to meet future investment requirements. This is what is meant by the ability or capacity of an industry to recapitalize itself. Honorable Minister, competition and introduction of the private should not be a religion to be introduced blindly irrespective of the consequences, the size of the economy, traffic volumes in the specific sector, revenues being generated from operations and market conditions. In fact, our assessment is that TRIM, that you mentioned just now, Minister, will require billions of rands in financial support from the national fiscus from SLS 2026, with increasing funding requirements every year thereafter. The MK party says this is extremely responsible and should be rejected. This is the beginning of the destruction of our railways, a major setback for South Africa and its economy. The MK party rejects this plan being rolled out by the coalition government, which is not based on the demands of our people or our level of economic development, and lacks sound understanding and knowledge of the operations of Transnet. Even under this specific PSP, Minister, the private sector will be left with no option but to increase prices, because without vertical integrated industries like transport and energy, their operational costs will skyrocket. They will be forced to come to you, Honorable Minister, and ask for financial assistance from the government. This will be a merry-go-round. And we have seen the same madness being applied in the commercial ports. However, private sector participation in ports is not a new thing. There've always been private companies in port terminals. The distinct feature of the current period is that strategic port terminals, especially those dealing with petroleum products and liquid fuels, including storage facilities, are now being given away. In the context of the shifting geopolitical changes and the critical need to protect our national interest, particularly in respect of energy sources, it is vitally important for Transnet National Ports Authority to retain ownership and operational control of key strategic terminals in the port environment. We have looked at the budget, Honorable Minister. I mean, one of the major things is that it doesn't champion public transport transformation. We've seen how the taxi industry is being undermined. Out of 15.9 billion rands, you only allocate a mere 110 million rands for the taxi empowerment project, and 408 for the taxi empowerment project, which is quite insignificant. And we want to say that, Minister, you promised us that you will review the taxi recap program. It is not done. We've seen the underspending in your own department. In fact, when you analyze the numbers, the allocation to public transport has in real terms decreased by minus 167%. I mean, this is really unacceptable. In a country like ours, with its geography of apartheid, where people live far from cities, surely public transport should feature high on the agenda. Honorable Minister, I saw you and the Minister of Finance celebrating about the allocation to PRASA. And I want to say that last year, government told PRASA to cut on the numbers. Now suddenly you are increasing. It's quite clear that it's got nothing to do with allocation to PRASA and championing public transport, but it has to do with the high penalties if you cut on
Honorable Member,
the
your time is now
So on that
expired.
basis, Minister, we think that we should pursue alternative public transport. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Mabena.